Hey everybody, it's January 26th on a yucky, rainy day in Houston, 2025. So let's talk about, yay! So let's talk about Russia and Japan. All right. So during the 19th century, Russia had, this looks like five czars. So czar being the king. They had five. That's, wow, 5 in 100 years? That's an average of 20 years per. How many did we have? Let's see, in 100 years. So if we start with, okay, I'm going to do this. All right, so 1900, I'm not going to do dates. So McKinley, President McKinley, followed by Roosevelt, followed by Taft, and then you had Hoover, Coolidge, Harding. No, I had that backwards. Harding, Coolidge, Hoover. You got Roosevelt. You got Truman. You got Eisenhower. You've got Kennedy. You've got Johnson, then Nixon, and Ford, and Carter, and Reagan, and Bush and Clinton, and that's the end of the century. Oh man, I did the wrong century. I did the 20th century, not the 19th century. All right, so in the 19th century, we had, the first one was Jefferson, and Madison, and Monroe, and John Quincy Adams, and you know what? Not Jackson and Van Buren. No, we're not going to do it. All right. The point is, the Russians only had 5. We had like 20 in each century. So it's kind of interesting. And now you know something weird about that. All right, so here are the 5 real quick. We've got Alexander the First, and we've already talked about Alexander the First. I don't think we have. Maybe have. Oh, we did in class. This is the one. He's famous for a couple things. One, he was the guy who backed up and burned the fields. And then that's why Napoleon lost, froze, had all of his men freeze out there in January of the War of 1812. And that was that guy. What else is Alexander known for? He's known for trying to expanding Russia down into the Ottoman Empire. So he's going to take the lands of Georgia. He's going to take the lands of Azerbaijan. And then he's going to have an idea about the serfs. Okay, so serf, S-E-R-F, serf. That's just another name for slave. In Russia, the serfs are white Russians, just super poor. And so it's going to be during the same time period as we have slavery over here in the United States. He's going to keep, Alexander I is going to keep the serfs as serfs. Other guys, Nicholas I, he's going to put down the Decembrist revolt. We have Alexander II, who's going to emancipate the serfs. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Alexander III is going to introduce Russification, and then Tsar Nicholas II, who's going to be the last of the czars. He's going to have his daughter named Anastasia, which we're not talking about in this video. That'll be down the road. All right, so we've got a couple of those cartoons, and we have over here, remember I'm doing this backwards, so I'm looking at so here we have this cartoon says, bear or bugbear? And those of you who are not Dungeons and Dragons people, you're like, what is a bugbear? Okay, a bugbear is like an ogre, a nasty, yucky, a bugbear. And so here we have, it looks like England over here, and England is saying, wait, are you a good guy or are you a bad guy? And then over here we have in the top corner, we've got the guy in the center, and that is, he represents the Ottoman Empire, and he says, save me from my friends. And on one side he's got the British lion, and on the other side he has the Russian grizzly bear. Save me from my friends. And then down here at the bottom, we have this bear dressed up like Paddington, I think. It looks like the Russian bear, and He's looking for some seaside lodgings, it says. That's the thing at the bottom. Seaside lodgings. And he's standing there, looks like he's trying to get a room at a hotel. And the hotelier, the person, the owner of the hotel, is Japanese. And that's going to be a big deal for us here in about, I don't know, 10 slides. All right. So, the Crimean War. Here's a war you haven't heard of, the Crimean War. It's a big deal. So we have the Crimean War. So the Black Sea. Here's what the short version is this. Russia, if you think about where Russia is, up there in the north, Russia doesn't have a lot of options with regard to warm water ports. Why is a warm water port important? What is a warm water port? A warm water port is a port that does not freeze during the winter. And you think about Russia, and you think about the cold up there in Russia. So the ports up in the Baltic Sea area, up there by Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, that area, during the cold months, that freezes over. And then, of course, anything north of Russia, the Arctic. And then if you go over there on the east side of Russia, over there by Japan, up there by the Vladivostok Peninsula, all that stuff freezes too. So Russia needs a warm water port where they can constantly trade. And so they're looking at the map, the Russians are looking at the map, and they're like, hey, the Black Sea. And so there's this little area is Crimea. And the Russians are like, hey, if nobody's watching, if nobody's looking, maybe we go ahead and take that. Because currently it's owned by the Ottoman Empire, but we discussed last week how the Ottoman Empire is about to and so the Russians are going to take advantage of this. Now the Russians are going to say, well, we're moving into the Crimea because we want to protect the Russian Orthodox Christians. And then Turkey is like, no. And so Turkey called its friends France, called Britain. And so France wants to protect the Catholics, and Britain wants to protect Turkey. And so now it's going to be this British, French, Turkish force against the Russians. And so it's the Crimean War. And the short version is this. Russia loses badly, like badly. And they don't get their warm water port. Several things are going to come out of this war that are very important. So, number one, like 4 things. Let's see if I can do all 4. 1, this is the first big war where defense wins, and or offense for that matter. I guess it all kind of works out that way. Best offense, good defense, etc., etc. We have. It's kind of interesting. At this point, we have now discovered how to kill people faster than we can put them back together. With all sorts of cool new bombs, with all sorts of cool new faster shooting guns. And the Crimea War is pretty deadly. This picture down here is a field full of cannonballs. And it was awful stuff. So that's 1. Lots of deaths. We are now killing people faster than ever before in wars. 2, the flip side of that is probably the most famous person to come out of the Crimean War was actually a nurse. And her name is Florence Nightingale. She's a British nurse, and she's going to come over and she's going to organize the nurses during the war. She's going to organize them, and she's going to save a lot of people's lives. She's known as the lady of the lamp, lady with the lamp, the lady of the lamp, the lady and the lamp. At night, she would take a lamp and she'd go to the different tents of the wounded soldiers, and she'd check in on them. And so people, the soldiers, were like, oh, there's our guardian angel. But anyway, her name is Florence Nightingale, and she's going to be important because of that. After the war, she's going to start basically a nursing college, and nurses are finally going to get a little bit of respect for what they do. Okay, that was 1, 2, 3. What was that? Oh, 3. So during the war, there was a situation where the British, there was a group of horses. There were 600 guys on horseback, They were it's a light company, so they were called the Light Brigade, and they were told, "Hey, we need you to go capture this hill." So the communication was not real clear about which hill to capture, and so the guy who was in charge is like, well, I think it's this hill. Turns out he was wrong. They were supposed to capture the other hill. So they're going to go after this other hill that they weren't supposed to go after. And unfortunately, at the top of the hill, there were a whole bunch of Russians with a whole bunch of basically machine guns and cannons. And these cavalrymen, the guys on the horses, basically have swords. So they're going to charge up this hill because they were told to. They're going to charge up this hill facing cannons with swords. What's the rule about bringing knives to a gunfight, kind of a thing? Right. And so they're going to charge up the hill, and they're going to inflict some wounds, but ultimately that's not going to be good. It's not going to be good for the 600 horsemen. And why am I talking about this one specific battle in the Crimean War? Well, because there's a poem. Oh, let's see if I can get to it. There's a poem written by Alfred Lord Tennyson, and it's called "The Charge of the Light Brigade." I just typed in "Charge of the Light Brigade" into Google, and it popped up. It says, "Poems that every child should know." So, the two of you who have never heard this, I want to read it. It's not very long. It goes like this. So again, we're talking about these 600 guys on horseback, and they were told, charge this hill, even though, it says this. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them volleyed and thundered. Stormed it with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well into the jaws of death. Into the mouth of hell rode the 600. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade. Noble 600. Okay. Probably the most famous line out of that is, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. And so that's the idea of, I was given orders, I guess I'm going to charge up that hill. All right. And the fourth point about this war is this. And this is arguably maybe the most important part. Russia is going to come back and is going to claim that area. Today, we call that area Ukraine. Right. This is Ukraine, guys. And, right. I'm glad you've been paying attention. Because, yeah, there you go. All right. Russification. So Russification is a term that basically says, so Alexander II getting smacked around in the war, Alexander II said, all right, we've gone backwards. Why are we so far behind the British and the French? What is going on? I thought we were doing well with Peter the Great, and we figured out, and we started to figure stuff out, and we shaved off of our beards, and we stopped wearing robes and all this kind of stuff. And we're still backwards, so we got to fix this. We got to fix this. And so Alexander II, the Tsar of Russia, he said, "Here's the problem. We have too many different groups of people in our country. And so we need to Russify all of them. We need to make sure that they're all speaking the same language. We need to make sure that we all have the same culture, that they're all the same religion, that they're all that eat the same food." It's called Russification. And so he tried to do this, and here we have the cartoon. We have a couple of guys who are Jewish, and they have stuff in their hands, and they're running away from Russia because the pogroms, the Russians are going to kick the Jews out. Okay, so now we know the word Russification. Do we have Americanization? Oh, okay. All right, the serfs. Russia realized maybe, because France and Britain and Turkey, they don't have slaves. Maybe it's the slaves. Maybe we should emancipate the slaves. And so, sure enough, in 1861, there was the Emancipation Reform. And so now all the serfs are free in Russia. Yay! Well, kind of. First of all, note 1861. So, those of you who know your U.S. history, was that before or after we freed the slaves in the United States history? 1861. I'll give you a second to think about that. Okay, so let's see. The 13th Amendment was 1865. And you're like, oh, right, the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. We've passed the 13th Amendment, and no more slavery, and then the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment. All right, so the Civil War amendments. This is not U.S. history. Let's move on back to world history. The point is the Russians freed their serfs before the United States freed the slaves. But, note, with the Russians, there was a caveat. Of course, in America, there's a caveat or two also. But the Russians have a caveat, and they said, hey, here's how you become free if you're a serf. First of all, you have a 2-year waiting period. Okay. Second of all, we're going to divide all this land out, and any extra land the rich people are going to get the extra land. And if you want to buy the land that you currently you're on as a serf, if you want to buy that, you can absolutely buy that land, so that way you don't have to go anywhere. Yay! That's great. That's wonderful. But the person who sets the price is your ex-serf master. And they can set the price at whatever price they want. Hey, here's some good news, though. The government is willing to give you a loan for 49 years. A 49-year loan. You have to pay that back with interest. Or you could just work for super, super cheap like you were going to do as a serf. And wow, that's wow. The good news, though, is that according to the Emancipation Reform of 1861, serfs could now marry whoever they wanted to. They could trade, they could sue, and they can vote. Yeah, they can vote. Sure, they can vote. Kind of like the United States. Slaves, oh, the slaves could vote. Sure, it would be fine. The ex-slaves, sure. All right, here's our new term, zemstvos. So, zemstvos is basically, what would we call that? A city council? Yeah, let's go with that. A city council, and where everybody gets represented and everybody gets to vote. And so what they do is they take all the rich people, and they're going to show up, and they all get a vote. And they usually show up as a group, and they hang out with all the cool people, get to hang out with the cool people, and then they all figure out how they're going to vote. And then the next tier of people, the small landowners, they get to elect people to then represent them in the Zemstvos. And so then the representatives go. And then you get delegates from the wealthier townsmen and then the less wealthy urban classes. And sure enough, the peasants who we used to call serfs, and now we're calling them peasants. The peasants also get elected officials to go vote at the at the city council. And even though the peasants make up like 95% of the population, the rich people get 74% of the vote. Fortunately, in the United States, we don't have to. Now we're going to move on from that. So, okay. So technically, I guess the serfs do get it. It's kind of like what was Benjamin Franklin who said, we wouldn't mind paying taxes, Your Majesty. We just want somebody to. We want one vote, just one vote. And wait, this is not American history. This is world history. The Russians, the peasants, they get a very, very small vote, but I guess they get a vote. All right, the trans-Siberian Railroad. We're going to go from one end of Russia to the other end of Russia. It's going to be 5,700 miles. That's the longest railroad in the world. And it's going to take 20 years. What is that? It's going to take 18 years. Man, I can't even do the math. It's going to take 15 years to build this thing. Almost 6,000 miles. Wow. That's a long way. 62,000 workers, and they didn't do it like we did in the United States, whereas in the United States we started at one end and then we started at the other end and we just kind of worked to the middle, and we met in Utah. What the Russians did was they had sections, so they had 7 sections. This is section A and section B and section C and section D. 7 of those sections, and then they divided up the workers and they said, all right, you go to section A, you go to section B, and we're all going to work on the sections together. And they all put it together. All right, a couple of some interesting facts about this. One, it actually came in under budget. Right? It actually cost less than was projected. Man, I wonder what that's like. Okay, what else is interesting? Oh, here's something interesting. The railroad did not run through any major cities. Now, why would they do that? Why would you design a track, which is, by the way, just a single track, wasn't a double track, just a single track, and now you're sitting there thinking, what if two, right? Why would you not go through major city? Politics. Politics, because if you pick this city and then you don't pick this city, well then city B is not very happy and city A is very happy. Now suddenly city B is very upset with the czar, and so here's what you do. You just make nobody happy and you don't put the railroad through any cities. Russia. Kind of fun. All right, so positives. Well, first major positive is there's a whole bunch of wheat fields out there in Siberia. Woo, cold wheat, winter wheat, and that wheat can now much easier get from point A to point B. Am I doing that correctly? That would be from point A to point B. Great. And here's some not so much positives. Now Russia is looking to the far end, and they're looking onto the other side of their country, and they're like, hey, warm water port over there by Japan, which we're going to get to apparently in a little bit. The intelligentsia, according to Wikipedia, the intelligentsia, I'm not going to read all that. The intelligentsia, I just copy and paste that into it. Intelligentsia basically is a group of reasonably smart people that use their brains and not their brawn to try to affect change. Okay. It's kind of interesting how Wikipedia says School teachers. School teachers are part of the intelligentsia. I should put that on my resume. Intelligentsia. Although maybe not so much, because the intelligentsia sometimes might have a little bit of a negative connotation to it, especially when the Russians are going to grab it. So the Russians are going to take this term in pre-revolutionary Russia. When we say pre-revolutionary Russia, we're talking about before the communists show up. And so intelligentsia, they're going to come up with some interesting ideas, trying to knock down the Tsar. Okay, so do you guys know Calvin and Hobbes, the comic strip? If you don't know comics, if you don't know Calvin and Hobbes, Calvin's this like little 6-year-old, and he's like a genius, and he has this tiger that is, depending on your beliefs, depending on your interpretations, the tiger is real or is a stuffed tiger. But he talks to his stuffed tiger, and here's a couple of different, I'm not going to read them or anything, but here are a couple of Calvin's discussions on genius philosophy. And I actually have 2 pages of that apparently, so okay. Here's a new fun, cool word for you: nihilism. Nihilism and anarchy, right? So nihilism. Nihilism is the belief that, oh, here's the short version. There you go. That's nihilism. It doesn't really matter. It is what it is. All right, whatever. Actually, I'm going to read a little bit. It says, "It's a philosophical doctrine that suggests a lack of belief in one or more reputedly meaningful aspects of life. Most commonly, nihilism is presented in the form of existential nihilism, which means that life is without objective meaning, purpose, or intrinsic value." Moral nihilism is moralism. Whatever, it's all made up. Nihilism can also take epistemological or ontological metaphysical forms. Look at me practicing those big words. Meaning respectfully that in some aspect knowledge is not possible, and that reality doesn't actually exist. So nihilism, right? So I've got a couple of funny ha-has. So this one says, nihilism is just a black square. Nihilism, I believe in it. That's that one. And then this one says, nothingness. It seems like it goes on forever. Nothingness, nothingness. And this is a fun one. Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche is he's like the nihilist philosopher, the guy. And so he famously said in 1883, he said, God is dead. And he's going to start the nihilist movement kind of thing. God is dead. And then the second half of the bumper sticker right there says, Nietzsche is dead, signed God, 1900, because, Nietzsche died. Okay, why is this important? Nihilism. Oh, whatever. Right. So speaking of some anarchists and some nihilists, we have an assassination on the 13th of March of 1881, Alexander II. So Alexander II, he's the one who lost Crimea, he's the one that freed the serfs. Some of the people don't like him. And so we've got this group of nihilists who are going to come after him. You can read all that, but let me tell you the story. So he's in his carriage, and he's going down the street. Is this in Moscow? I think this is in Moscow. It doesn't matter. Somewhere out there in Russia, cold Russia. So he's in his carriage and the horses, etc., etc. And here comes the first bomber. The first bomber, he has this bomb. It's inside this handkerchief. And he tosses the bomb underneath the carriage, and boom! And people are killed, body parts going everywhere, and the Tsar is not hurt because it turns out the carriage is bulletproof. And so Right. So the Tsar, right, and so the Tsar, he gets out of the carriage. He gets out of the bulletproof carriage. And and of course all of his guys are like, no, 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 get back and we gotta go, we gotta go. That was an attempt on your life, we gotta go. And the Tsar's like, nah, you know what? I got this. The bomber, and they saw who did it, and so they already tackled that guy. Well, they didn't realize that there was bomber number 2 in the crowd. Bomber number 2 sees that bomber number 1 did not succeed, so bomber number 2 takes his bomb, and there's the Tsar just standing there in the street. So bomber number 2, he throws the bomb at the Tsar, and right there in front of the Tsar, boom! And so basically, not quite blows off the legs of the Tsar, but it does some awful, awful things to the Tsar and kills a whole bunch of other people. And so when the smoke clears, they grab the Tsar and they take him, they put him into the bulletproof carriage, which he got out of, and they take him to the White Palace. Oh, I guess this is in St. Petersburg now that I think about it. And so he's going to die not very long after that, because you know when you got giant open areas where lots of blood is spilling out of your body, yeah, you're not going to live very long. And so what was I going to say about that? Oh, by the way, there was a third bomber in the crowd, just in case they didn't need him. All right. But that's just one Tsar. We got at least one more Tsar after this, Nicholas II. So we have a group of guys who are they're not anarchists, and they're not nihilists, and they're not intelligentsia, and they're not revolutionaries, but they're all 4 of these put together. We call them the Mensheviks. And the Mensheviks, they want to take down the whole thing. They want to take down the whole structure, get rid of the Tsar, not just this Tsar. They want to get rid of the whole system. They want to have what like we have over in the Western countries. They want to have, you know, representative democracy and that kind of stuff. Wouldn't that be great? And so they talk about how the proletariat, there's a Russian word for the common people, we're going to take down the bourgeoisie, which is a Russian word for, well, it's kind of a French word, that means the rich people. And so this group of revolutionaries are called the Mensheviks. And then you have a small part of the Menshevik group called the Bolsheviks, and the Bolsheviks are like, yes, 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 we totally agree. Now how can we use guns to do all of that? They're the more violent. And so the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. And so here are a couple of interesting, the Russians and their cartoons, right? So here we have at the top, the guy that looks like Jabba the Hutt. He kind of really looks like Jabba the Hutt right up there. That's the Tsar. And you've got the people down here, and they're all protesting or trying to hold up this and all this crazy stuff. And you got the guys over here, and these are the Bolsheviks. And the guy in the center in the red, his name is Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. He's going to be important later, not this PowerPoint. But he and his buddy named Trotsky, and another guy by the name of Stalin, and they are going to have the Bolshevik Revolution. And we're not talking about this; we're talking about something else. And then down here we got the light bulb from the Mensheviks, and the light bulb, and we're going to take down the Tsar. Okay. So the Russian-Japanese War. Remember, the Russians have the trans-Siberian train, and so the Russian-Japanese War. The Russians. So here's Russia, and there's the train, here's Japan, there's Korea in the red. And so this little place right there is called Port Arthur, and it is a warm water port. The Russians want that, and so the Russians make a deal with the Chinese, because here's China. The Russians make a deal with China. Japan is not very happy about this, because they do not want Russia involved on this side of the world. So the Japanese are telling the Russians no. And so Russia says, all right, let's do this. Let's take Korea, let's divide Korea in half. And so we will be, the Russians talking, the Russians saying, we'll be in charge of basically the north half of Korea. We'll draw the 39th parallel. Some of you are like, wait, the Korean War? No, wait, well, yes, but no, this is 100 years, this is 50 This is 50 years before this, before the Korean War. So the Russians are going to take the north half, the Japanese can have the south half, and the Japanese are like, no, 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 we don't want you to have any of this. And so ultimately Japan declares war on Russia. Okay, so it's not a fair fight. It's like Japan and Russia is not a fair fight, right? Right? Little bitty Japanese islands and the great big bear of Russia. No, it wasn't a fair fight. The Japanese kicked their tail. Because mostly it's a naval war, and Russia, where are their boats? Right. Russia doesn't have a lot of boats because they don't have warm water port yet, and all their big navy, it's on the other side of the world, right? And then where are all their soldiers? And then all their soldiers are on. So yeah, the Japanese smacked them around, and well, there you go. Down here we got this cool little cartoon. We've got the Japanese, it says, it's a French postcard, it says, Le Grand Duo Jaune et Blanc. And so you've got the guy in yellow, and then the white polar bear, I guess that represents the cold Russian winter, the white polar bear, and it's a wrestling contest, but it's not really a contest. It's kind of interesting to me, in the back here we've got Teddy Roosevelt, who's the President of the United States, and you can see he's got a kind of a flag shirt there. It looks like he's about to take a swim. These guys in swim trunks. He's going to take a swim. Roosevelt is important because Roosevelt is the one who negotiates the peace treaty between Japan and Russia. He gets a Nobel Prize for that, by the way. Okay. Is that all I want to say about that slide? I think so. It's getting darker outside. It's about to rain even more. It is what it is. Okay. Okay. Speaking of dark humor, the French and their postcards. And I'm like, what are we talking about? The French postcard? What are we talking about? France? Because this is Russia and Japan. No. It's worth it. This is worth it. This is why you watch these videos, because I have something stupid like this. All right. So the French postcards. This is a band, it looks like 4 guys, and they are blowing their horns. And they are Japanese guys, and they're blowing their horns at Port Arthur, celebrating the victory over Russia. And now that you look closer, if you get the PowerPoint and you look and you kind of scroll in, you're like, now wait a second. Those are Japanese butts. I know, this is so immature. And so those Japanese soldiers are actually, they have butt faces, and they're blowing their horns through their butts. And the French are known for this rude scatological humor, but the I keep saying the word. It's funny that the Japanese are. Have you ever heard of blowing your own horn, blowing your own? Because nobody else will talk good about you, so you do it yourself. You're blowing your horn through. Okay, we're moving on. Or whatever. All right, almost done. No, that's not true. We got about 10 more minutes. Revolution 1905. So the Revolution 1905 was the first attempt to bring down the Tsar. And so we talk about Bloody Sunday. And so this is an artist's conception of, the Russian troops lined up here with their guns, and all the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, and they're getting shot at, etc., etc., etc. And so that's an artist's interpretation. And this is actually a real photo down here where you have the Russians army with their guns, and the Mensheviks and Bolsheviks lined across there. It looks like a snowy day. The Revolution in 1905, they used strikes by the workers, they used peasant unrest, and then military mutinies. And ultimately what's going to come out of this is the constitutional reform. They're going to have a new constitution in Russia in 1906. Now they're still going to have a czar in 1906. That's going to be all the way up to 1917. Oh, that was lightning outside. I lose power, I lose power. No pressure. I gotta talk faster. Can you hear the thunder? All right, Japan. Japan. Oh, look, another triangle. Yay, another triangle. So we've got the emperor at the top. You've got the shogun, the daimyos, the samurais. That's the warrior class. The ronin are the paid soldiers. And we've already kind of talked about this before. So let's make sure we know our words. So make sure I know my words. The emperor. You'd think I'd know that one. The emperor. He is the boss. De jure, remember de jure, de facto. De jure is by law, by the book, what it says on the piece of paper. The boss, de jure, the emperor. And then you have the shogun who's the chief general, the military leader of Japan. And he, let's just say it, he's the boss de facto, the guy who's actually in charge, right? And then again, we have the daimyos and the samurai and the ronin, who are the paid soldiers, and then below that we have 90% of the population who are the peasants, and then below the peasants you have the artisans, the artists. Sorry, Stidham, you're way towards the bottom. And then at the very bottom we've got merchants. At the very bottom you have the merchants. Why? Oh, yeah, kind of like China, right? You put the merchants at the bottom because what do merchants actually do? They sell other people's work. All right. So Japan, if you recall, last time we talked about Japan was we had influence from the Netherlands and from other countries, and so they kicked out the Christians. Remember that one? It was like 3 or 4 videos ago. They kicked the Christians out. They had the martyrs of Nagasaki. And so Japan decided we're going to just shut down the borders. We're just going to shut them down, and we're not going to have anybody come in, except for maybe this one little bitty island at the bottom and south of Japan, and we're going to allow the Dutch, just the traders, the merchants, we're going to let them trade just back and forth just a little bit, but that's it. No other cultural exchange between us and the rest of the world for 220 years, basically. And so we call this rangaku, the idea that the Japanese are going to wall themselves off, but then they are going to trade just a little bit with the Dutch. And then you have sakoku, which is isolation, and that's, you know what? We don't even want to talk to the Dutch anymore. And so from 1633 to 1868. It was death penalty, capital punishment, death penalty for a Japanese person to leave the island, or for a foreigner to come in. It was a death penalty. And so Japan was like, we are not playing with anybody, And so, except for that one little area that the Dutch were allowed to just trade. But nobody else was allowed to play. So the United States of America, we're like, rules don't apply to us. We're gonna trade with you, Japan. We're gonna force you to trade. And so the Japanese are like, well, you can't really make us. You can't really make us. And so President 1853. President Millard Fillmore. Yes, we had a president's name. President Millard Fillmore sent Commodore. What's the difference between an admiral and Commodore? Interesting. I bet you all my ROTC students know that. Commodore Perry, Matthew Perry, was sent to Japan to negotiate with the Japanese to open up trade with the United States of America. And so he showed up with 4 large ships and pointed the guns at Japan. It was on July 8th when he showed up with his very large ships with very large guns. It was on July 8th, and he had all of his ships fire these big old cannons, fired blanks, 73 cannons, I think, something like that. And so when later when he was asked, why did you fire 73 blanks? And he's like, oh yeah, I was celebrating, 4th of July on, July 8th. However, the Japanese saw these really big ships with really big guns fire very loud noises, and they quickly realized, ooh, wow. And so they told Commodore Perry, hey, we're willing to talk with you, but we're going to talk with you over here at land A. And Perry said, no, we're going to talk over here at land B. And the Japanese were like, well, no, land B, nobody goes over there unless you're Japanese. And Perry says, nobody goes over there unless you're Japanese, or if you're an American in a very large battleship. By the way, we have a term for it. It's called gunboat diplomacy. Now you know a cool new term, gunboat diplomacy. So the Japanese were like, and so Perry's like, oh, did you want to see a demonstration of how far we can shoot this? No. So a Japanese delegate, he shows up and he says, all right, what are your demands? And Perry's like, you're not high enough in the rank. I'm not even going to talk to you. Go bring me somebody who's higher up, maybe like the emperor. Go get me the emperor. And ultimately, Perry gives his list of diplomatic demands and says, all right, well, we're going to let you talk about this. We're going to float over to China for just a second, and then we'll be back here in about a year. We'll be back with your make sure so you have a year to think about it. So he goes over to Japan. He goes over to China, and while he's in China, he learns about the Russians, and he learns about how the French and the Germans are interested, and the British are also interested in opening up trade. And now Perry's like, oh man, we're not going to get exclusive trade with the Japanese. So he's like, forget this, I'm not going to wait a year. And he comes back to Japan and he says, all right, Japanese, we need to know, and we need to know right now. And again, notice where our guns are pointed towards, like your cities. And the Japanese agree. Gunboat diplomacy, and now the United States can officially trade with Japan. In 1868, we're getting very, very close here. In 1868, wow, you could do an entire, literally you could do an entire semester on this one slide, the Meiji Restoration of Japan. So the Meiji Restoration, I'm going to do it in 30 seconds. The Meiji Restoration is when the Japanese realized, wow, we're a little behind, so we need to kick it into gear, and so we're gonna switch up some stuff. We're still going to have the emperor, but we're going to figure out we have way too much military going on here, and so we need to convert some stuff. We need to increase our schooling. We need to increase our art. We need to increase all culture. So it's called the Meiji Restoration. And so they're going to remove the fiefdoms on the big triangle. We're going to remove the daimyo system, and so we're going to make the samurai are not samurai anymore. We're going to do all that kind of stuff in Japan, and so we're going to. That was a big lightning strike. So we're going to. Here comes the rain. And lightning strike, and the samurai. So the samurai are going to they're going to lose their status as military warlords, and instead they're going to take their status and they're going to start forming companies. And so they're going to still be big dogs on the tree, but on the pyramid. But there you go. Hey, here's some names of famous samurai. There's a samurai named Toyota, there's a samurai named Kawasaki, there's a samurai named Nintendo. There's a samurai named Sony. No, I don't think there's a samurai named Hello Kitty. Maybe. Oh, that was it. Fantastic. So the 5 themes, there's 6 themes because I can't remember ever to put the 6th theme on there. Technology. So government, social, gender, environment versus humans, economic ideas, and technology. All right. And that is Russia and Japan in the 19th century. I think we're good. Yeah? All right. Everybody be good. You know who I'm talking to. You in the corner back there. Be good.